Recyard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the Rec Yard every Wednesday night. Hey, everyone. It is our favorite night of the week with our favorite people. We are on the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast. I'm Marci Marie.
I'm Toonche.
Toonche, why are you making that face?
Well, because I left this kitchen light on, and I hate that yellow light because it looks like an interrogation room, and it just kills my cool vibe. I just hate that I did that.
I hate that you did that too, because you're not getting up.
No, and then everybody will see my booty shorts.
Right. We have a great show for y'all tonight. We are talking about medical and health care in prisons and jails, or I should say, including the lack thereof, right? Because that's definitely an issue. So I think it's going to be a good one.
I think so too. I'm very excited. Y'all know that this is my favorite time of the week. I've been in back-to-back meetings all day, but there's updates to share. I'll let you hit the button.
Let's do a weekly recap. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Wasn't that smooth? That was so smooth.
That was smooth. We see y'all in the chat, and thanks so much for joining us. TikTok family, thank you for that. I'm sorry that the live went out for a minute on TikTok, but I see you, Carrie. We see you, Lori Mellinger, who just got on to see if Jen was still alive because she's not answering her text messages. Shayna, we see you watching from Facebook. Devin, my sister-in-law, living that sober life. So proud of you and love you much, Devin. Anthony, thank you for that. And I apologize again for the TikTok that it went off and like it's going back on now. So you guys hang in there over there. Audra Lee, I see you. And she's thinking it's Friday. It's not Friday.
Not Friday yet. It feels like Friday because tomorrow's a holiday. Marci, I hate to tell you this, but there was some feedback when I started talking.
Why?
I don't know. It's gone now, but
interesting. Well, that's why we were supposed to get on early enough to do like sound checks and stuff.
Oh, man.
So I apologize if the sound's not perfect.
Oh God, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
How was your week? How was your week, honey? How was it?
How was my week? Well, first of all, I want to say that this weekend I was in my Just Leadership training all weekend, 8 to 5. It was a lot. It was good. It was really great. It was great conversations about conflict management.
Love it.
I learned a lot. Yeah, I loved it. And then also something happened this week. Do you know what?
I feel like I should know what, but I haven't a clue.
I started my new job this week.
We talked about that. We did. You did start a new job. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. My fellowship was over at the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, and I am now full-time at Texas After Violence Project.
That's so exciting. And they're so lucky to have you.
I'm truly so lucky to have them. They're beautiful human beings, and the scope of our work there is, I hope for us to be a little bit involved in policy, but I'm really excited about growing community efforts, and also activating our archive of stories, to educate and inspire our communities. So very excited.
Well, you're getting a lot of congratulations in the chat. Carrie's watching on YouTube. Shayna's watching on Facebook. And we're all really happy for you. I cannot for the life of me think about what my weekly recap is.
Busy chasing children and trying to do 50 meetings at one time.
Yes, all of that, but I guess that's it. How did that happen? We do have a nanny that she's coming 2 days a week to help with the kiddos. Yeah, and so I'm really excited for that, and the kids are getting used to it. The 6-year-old nephew loves her. The baby is still like wanting me when he sees me, you know, and I'm sure he'll get used to her, but she plays with them and entertains with them, and it's great.
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm excited. We are getting ready for. I'm going to LA.
Oh, that's
I
right.
leave. Yeah, I think I leave Sunday. I mean, I just leave soon, and then I'll be home for one day, and then to Colorado. So we're going to be figuring all of that out as we go. So anyways, Norma Rodriguez Ortiz, watching from Facebook, says, "Congratulations from your number one fan, Toonche." All the people
Norma,
love
I love you, so
Toonche.
precious.
Gosh,
You're a hater. You're a
I
hater.
I am a hater a little bit.
You're a
Quickly talk
petty
about.
queen hater. Yes.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Talk a little bit quickly about the day of advocacy for the Finish the Five, and also while you're collecting your thought on that, TikTok's wishing you congratulations as well. Our
Thank you.
TikTok family on here. Thank you, Dana, for that.
Dana, and y'all, the only other missing piece I have in my life is to find a wife. So put the call out. I'm taking applications for that. So the Finish the Five campaign is a campaign here in Texas, a coalition of organizations, individuals to close down Texas youth prisons. There's 5 remaining prisons. We would like to see them closed down. And we also want to stop new construction of youth facilities. We were at the Commissioner's Court last week. I forgot to mention that. Giving comments, community members were giving comments about why we don't want I believe it's over $300 million building or I could go on about that. It's another episode, but to try to stop the construction of that. So we're going to have a youth advocacy day on the 12th at the Capitol. You can find the registration links on the Finish the Five social media, on the Lioness social media, on my stuff. We would love to see you here at the Capitol. Please register so we know how many and who's coming, so that we can make sure that we have plenty of snacks and food. We're going to be learning about how to tell our stories. We're going to know more about the policy issues. And then guess what? We're going to go around in groups around the Capitol and go to different legislators' offices and talk about our experience and why we want to see those youth prisons closed down. So hope to see you there. You're on mute.
I am on mute. Thank you for calling me out on the show.
Yes, absolutely.
You're doing it quietly so that the people listening on Spotify and iHeartRadio and Apple Music all know that too. I appreciate
your
support there. I wanted to, Haley, there's not an event happening in Colorado. We are going to be there with the International Hazards Workshop. It's for researchers and teams that work on natural disasters, and we are there in our capacity at Lioness, Justice Impacted Women's Alliance, talking about why it's important to have plans for natural disasters and what happens when you don't have plans in prisons. So that's what we're going to be doing. But hey, hit us up. Maybe you could come swim. We're going to be hanging out at the pool a lot when we're not doing that. So, yeah, definitely. So tonight we're talking about medical care in prisons. Now, you and I have over 30 years experience in the Texas prison system. We're pretty well versed on medical needs and medical mishaps in the women's prisons here in Texas. And we also have some jail experience. On top of that, we're in contact with lots of incarcerated folks that send us information about what's going on, and so many family members worried about their loved ones and the lack of medical care that they're getting. So let's get into it. Medical care in the Texas prison system.
God, where do we even begin? I the stories, just the stories alone that we could tell, Marci, about how atrocious healthcare is in the prison system, and especially on the units. So I think it would be important for people to know, when we talk about medical care, we've got kind of two distinct, or two different layers of it. You have medical unit, you've got the unit medical care, and then you have the prison hospital medical care. And I think there's some big differences there. Yeah, so maybe explain to people the difference real quick before we start talking about it.
Well, each unit has, and I don't know if it's every unit, Toonche. I think it's at least a nearby unit has a medical facility on site. So everywhere where I did my time, the 3 units I was on all had their own medical unit, which the biggest one was the Dr. Lane Murray unit. That was considered a medical unit. So we had a PA, we had a physician's assistant, and we had an actual MD, 3 medical providers on that unit, and a nursing staff. And you go in and it's doctor office-ish, like it's looking similar to that. It's got exam rooms, it's got a central desk, and of course it also has officers yelling at you. and I want to also start really quickly before we kind of get into the hospital is to say, on my personal platforms, I have a lot of medical staff or former medical staff in the prison system that took that job because they want to help, because they enjoy that field. They want to help people. They know that incarcerated people are a vulnerable population and have special needs. And dare I say every single one, surely I can't say 100%, but I can confidently say 95% of the feedback I get from that group of people is that the agency made it impossible for them to do their job, to be okay. They had to either get out of the field for their own mental health, that there were so many restrictions from staff, and then staff interfering, and that it made it really impossible. So I don't want it to seem like we're just coming down on medical staff in the prison system. I believe that a lot of those folks get into that work because they do want to see positive changes made. I also believe that a lot of those folks go work for a prison because perhaps something else happened at another job. So I think it's a crazy mixture of workers. So anyway, that's it. I'm just saying I'm down with some of the prison nurses. Y'all don't quit following me. I love you. I love hanging with you on TikTok and all of that. I'm down with y'all, and I hear you. I hear what you're saying about the obstacles of offering good health care inside of that. Yeah. So,
well,
then, yeah.
Please. No, you're still explaining. I'm sorry, I jumped.
No, I was just thinking about the hospital. So the different then the state of Texas has a prison hospital near Galveston, Texas, and it's all the way south. So from most of the women's units, it's an 8-hour drive, but it's still where they go, and they have, it's a hospital for people in prison, and I've been there too a few times.
Boy. So, yeah, and I appreciate that I've been on your lives on TikTok when we've had some medical providers like nurses jump on there, and it just like it's not every single correctional staff member, although it is a lot of them. I would say that, I think with medical, a lot of people that do work in medical, I think, are there because they enjoy their profession. I think sometimes what happens is that whatever culture you're in, you become a part of. And so that apathy and, dealing with all the stuff that you deal with in a prison environment can make you very apathetic. And I wanted to read a little excerpt from, thank you so much for one of our Lioness San Antonio members, Lisa, for sharing some information with us today. And she said it was, the writer said it was free to share. But she did mention something kind of really articulating kind of that apathy. And she said, I had to go to get medical involved with my bunkie, right? That's the person you're in the cell with, or share, your bed space with. And they ended up having to call 911 and take her off the unit. I'm very concerned about her. She is another person that they have been passing over for a month. And so what we would see a lot is that apathy. Like I remember when a friend of ours, she was going to medical repeatedly at the unit. I am having pain. Oh, you've got a UTI. Oh, you've got gas. She's like, no, it's severe. And it got to the point where she was in bed with a fever and not able to move. And it was the women in the dorm, which we talk a lot about. Thank God for us in this together, because it was the women in the dorm. One of them worked in the beauty shop. So she was able to get out of the dorm a little bit easier, to get to an actual ranking officer. Come get this lady. I don't want to say her name, but had to take her away in an ambulance. Her kidney infection was so severe. She had a fever. She was almost in a coma and she had been going to medical, Marci. So how many times did you see that happen, that people are continuing to go to medical with an actual serious problem, and it keeps getting dismissed under other silly diagnosis?
Way too many times to count. The most severe time, I'll just quickly, because I don't want this show to be like us just trauma dumping, because it does cause a lot of trauma when you're seeing that happen to people that you care about and people that you're incarcerated with. And it also gives you a complete sense of hopelessness when that kind of thing happens, and takes any faith you have in the medical field or the medical professionals there away. And so I had a very good friend. Her and I started our time together. We ended up having a lot of visitations together because her children were the same age as mine. It made our families get to know each other. It was that kind of dynamic because they were like standing in line for visit together. And anyways, her same thing, severe pain in her abdomen, pain, them telling her she's constipated, them telling her she's just bloated for months. She had her little tummy. She was a very thin person, and she developed this little tummy, which she had never had, and it was hard. And they're still not telling her anything. She's in so much pain that she's in the day room at day room time, and she is like, we're in line for the phones, and she's like this, just holding her stomach and bent over while she's in line for the phone. And she gets on the phone with her husband, whose name is Matt, and she's talking to him, and I'm like, you have to get him to start harping on these people because they're not helping you. And she's just like, I don't want to bother him. I don't want to stress him out. And she's on the phone, and I get up and completely violate a rule by grabbing the phone from her while she's on the phone with her spouse. And I said, Matt, you have to start calling up here. Something is really wrong with your wife. And from that, she ended up, by the time she got diagnosed, she had stage 4 cancer. It was in her liver. And that's what we were feeling, this cancerous tumor in her stomach. She passed away within weeks of her diagnosis. And she had been incarcerated with me at this point 8 years, had been complaining about this for 8 months before. And so that was probably one of the most severe. But, it happened to me, Toonche. I mean, it happened the same thing with the kidney infection. And then they're telling me nothing's wrong with me, and I'm in so much pain, and I'm on the hoe squad.
Oh God.
And they come to I'm like, I'm laying it down today. I'm not going. I'm sick. I felt horrible. And they're at my door. Oh, you're going. My boss told me, Boss Tyson, who's now a ranking officer, which is quite frightening. She said, oh, you're going. You're going today. 2 days later, I convinced one of the staff members to send me to medical. My temperature was 104. They had me laying in there feeding me ice chips. It was just, I'm like, I've been sick for a week and a half. really sick. And so that, yeah, that happens. That happens.
And and I may have told y'all this here before, is that it was things like that, and not, having your needs met, or being cared for, just the harmful things that happened with our medical experience. I would not go to the doctor out here. Like, if something's wrong, I'm just going to sweat it out and lay in bed. And I avoided the doctor. And y'all know that my sister-in-law passed away a little over a year ago. And it frightened me. And I started to really think about, like, why do I have such an avoidance? And I'm being cheap. Well, no, girl, you finally have insurance for the first time in your life. Like, what is your problem? And I think it was because I felt like a lot of times people left medical worse. I know people that had unnecessary things removed during surgeries that was not even, whoops, sorry, I thought you were here for this. Like, that really happens.
It absolutely happens. It also happens with things getting left in them. I know 2 different incarcerated women that one was netting, some form of netting was left in her, and it turned into this huge infection. And one was a utensil, a surgical utensil. And I know that happens in the free world, but it's concentrated in there. I don't know the statistics. I only know what we saw, and I feel like it definitely happens more in there. I will go on to say that the hospital that offers most of the women's treatment, I think there's like 2 major medical units, and UTMB was ours, but both of them are student based, and I'm all for that as well. I would do that in the free world. I'm not saying that there's something against that, but I think that also offers a level of maybe fear for incarcerated folks. I want to just touch on this really quick, because Desiree, who's watching from Facebook, thank you for joining us, Desiree. She's talking about the HIPAA violations, and I experienced that myself. I had a staff member, I had overdosed. I lost my shit in the middle of my prison sentence. And I've talked about that before on here. Follow me on my other social media pages if you want to hear more about that. But it included pills, and when you're seeing medical as an incarcerated person, there are officers, prison guards with you the whole time.
Yeah.
Mental health care, physical health care, having a baby, getting a women's female exam, it doesn't matter. There's an officer. So when I'm dealing with these pills, and I won't go into like massive detail here, but that officer was present. And I went to the psych hospital. I ended up months in the psych hospital. I come back to the unit and feeling a little bit healed, feeling a little bit better. And I'm in the chow hall with a massive amount of other people, incarcerated people and staff members. And she just called it out really loud, really rudely, and that, you're right. That's a HIPAA violation, and I grieved her. What happened to that grievance? I have no idea. But it was beyond humiliating, but also just as someone that was in severe mental health crisis when that was going on, and just now coming out of that, it felt particularly, so that happens. And then so that's a level of distrust also, to know that a staff member is always there. They're going to know your business, whether or not they talk. Y'all, if it's a lot like high school, in that everybody knows everything. The teachers are all telling the business, students are all telling the business, same thing. The staff is all telling everybody's business. We know if we see a staff member cheating on their husband, we're all talking about it. And if they see one of us doing something crazy medically, or something big medically going on, they're all talking about it. There's no privacy there.
Right. There is none. There is none, not even in medical. There's no privacy. And and when you're in the exam room, and there's always supposed to be a nurse in there with you and the provider. You're never supposed to be alone in there. And Marci, I'm going to tell you that there were, and Desiree's mentioning one of the PAs that when I was at Crane, there were PAs that we all knew. Yes, they harmed us in those ways that women alone with disgusting men get harmed. And I remember a young lady coming back to the dorm. Just, I knew, like, that look in her eyes, that dissociated look. I said, girl, what is wrong? And she told me what happened. And was the only time that Safe Prisons, which is our PREA officer, our Prison Rape Elimination Act officer that monitors all those types of incidences, is the only time I ever saw that process work. Because I told the girl, you know, I've heard this about this man before. And I remember her looking at me and saying, wait a minute. She kind of snapped out of it for a second. And she was like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me other people, other women on this unit have had this happen to them? I said, that's what they come in. I was a peer educator, I was a peer health educator. So people would tell, you know, plus Marci, people like to talk to me. And I said, I've heard it. And she said, and they never said anything? I said, no, I could never give them enough support or convince them enough to go report it. She goes, wait a minute, but if they had, just by chance, this may not happen to me. I said, that is correct. She goes, no, I want to go say something. Like that sent her over the edge. She was like, no, I want to say something. She goes, but I don't feel like the safe prison sergeant is going to believe me, because she was kind of a bad actor, you know. She got into trouble all the time. She was feisty. And I said, I'm going to tell her. And I did. I left education, you know, like the lady that was the beautician that had a little bit more room to be able to get places. You know, I made it down to her office and I told her. And she goes, as soon as I said the girl's name, she said, I said, stop. I said, this is the stuff you ask us to come do, and you've got to do your part. You've got to. She goes, well, do you believe her? I said, I've heard it from other women. She goes, okay. She called her out. And she heard her, and she was, okay, we'll sit right here. Now, whether she was supposed to question the nurse in front of her or not, I don't know, but she did. And she said, well, where was the nurse? She said, she left. She left the room. So she calls the nurse out. Hey, you know, starts asking her questions. And then starts, you know, were you in the room the whole time? She goes, well, no. Oh, okay. Well, let me ask you about this procedure. And she starts making excuses and coming up with some bullshit. And the sergeant stopped her and said, ma'am, I've had 2 children. You are making that up. I've never experienced that. Get out of my office. And I don't know if the nurse got in trouble, but now he was asked to leave, retire, move on, whatever. But he was. And I didn't ever hear about him working in the system again. And I said, well, we'll take it as a win. I would love if he'd had some more accountability.
Criminal charges. Right? Criminal charges should have been filed against him. But we see that time and again when prison staff, when the victims are incarcerated, people have a hard time bringing criminal charges against whoever broke the law against them. It's not right. Yeah. If that had happened in the free world, she could have contacted an attorney and she'd had a bankroll.
Yeah. She'd have had far more. Now, I did appreciate the fact that he was gone. And I said, now and I remember that when she found out he was gone, because Sergeant had called her back up there, and she came back in the dorm, and she was just, I can't even explain it. She was like, it worked. She believed me, right? Like, she believed me. And, you know, we didn't often experience that kind of stuff. And so I don't, you know, so it gave me a level of distrust with medical. Also, you know, going back to medical from Texas Youth Commission, the juvenile system, Lord have mercy. And so it has affected my day-to-day out here, because I haven't, you know, I really wasn't utilizing going to the doctor and caring for myself. And I have a instant distrust.
Well, if you get hurt, in prison, you don't drop a sick call. You're
Right.
not trying because you get a disciplinary case. So that's embedded. You did 20 years. Even in my 10 years, I think twice before even telling my grandmother that I stubbed my toe. Like it's that instinct that this is private. I keep this to myself. I don't tell other people about this because my neighbor might run it in and then I'm getting a case, or I mean, just whatever. And then on top of that, just the distrust for the medical field. Of course, that has carried over into your post prison life. Of course, that is still, you've only been home 4 years after 20 years of incarceration. Toonche, I think that's perfectly normal. I want to acknowledge my TikTok community watching. Thank y'all again. They're thanking you for advocating for that incarcerated lady. And also Valerie's watching on TikTok, and she says that they pulled her wrong tooth. They just pull.
Yep.
How many times did you see
How many
that?
times did I remember one lady coming back from John Seeley. Not only did they pull the wrong tooth, they broke her jaw. They were supposed to take out a wisdom tooth over here, put her under sedation, went to dig at a tooth that wasn't even impacted or even through the skin, but they thought, well, this is the wisdom tooth we're supposed to dig out. And they ended up breaking her. She got back to the unit, Marci. It was the color of this sweatshirt, black. We were like, oh my God, what happened? She was like, she could barely talk. She was like, they did the wrong side. And so then she had the impacted, painful tooth on the other side with this.
Wow. I just wow. And so many stories are flooding back to me about that. And I mean, just about medical care in general. I'm thinking about a girl that's her appendix ruptured and they're not doing anything. And it's at night and I'm at line control. Why am I at line control? Probably for for some disciplinary purpose. And she's there because nobody's helping her. And we're standing outside and she's like bent over. She's throwing up bile, like and no one is doing anything. Medical's closed. They're no one. I said, you better start acting crazy.
Go to Hollywood, baby.
Yes. And that's what we called it in there. You better go to Hollywood. You better turn up your Hollywood. You better do Hollywood. Get your Hollywood on. And you better start acting like you are dying. You better start screaming out in agonizing pain so that these people hear you and until they do something. And that's what would have to be done. I had a friend that was incarcerated with me during COVID. She had a mass on her in her private area, and it was some kind of abscess or cyst or something. We didn't know. I'm not a nurse. They call me because I'm Mama Marci. People call me, hey, come look at this. Can you help this? And that's what she's dropping sick calls. She showed me. She laid in her floor of her cubicle and showed me. She's crying. It's hurting. It's the size of a baseball between her legs. I said, baby, you're going to have to make them come get you in a wheelchair. At count time, you better act like you're hurting so bad that you can't get on your bunk, because that's what we would have to do to get attention or care. So, that's with everything, mental health care, everything. So oftentimes that behavior also comes with disciplinary cases. But at what point, if you're not being heard or your needs are not being met, at some point you're going to explode. And that's what the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And she did. And they took her, not to the hospital, to the medical, and took care of her. She came back to the dorm and she was better, she's okay. But yeah, you had to do that. I know I'm neglecting the comments here.
Well,
I feel myself getting fired up.
I know. And maybe we need to ground ourselves a little bit just in the present moment. And this is a good exercise for anybody that shares their story and their lived experience. It's been good for me that when I get really triggered or really deep in the memory where I'm now feeling all the emotions like it's happening, I literally start feeling my surroundings. and it will draw you back into the present moment. So
I also will just take this moment then, because Department of Corrections couldn't be here tonight, and we'd certainly miss him. I know he'll watch the aftermath, but if you're watching us, thank you. We see you, we hear you. Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. Thank you for being here, and thank you for commenting. Thank you for tapping that like button, those hearts, and thank you for sharing the live. If you're listening wherever you hear your favorite podcasters, we ask that you leave us a review. We appreciate you listening, and our little community here is growing, and we're really excited. Again, this is our favorite night of the week. We love you all so much, and it does get a little bit. Sometimes we're talking about late nights in the penitentiary and talking about booty shaking and all the crazy things we did in there to entertain ourselves. And sometimes we're talking about much more serious topics, and they do get to you. And so thank you for that, Toonche, for bringing us back to the present.
Yeah.
And
It gets
yes,
a lot.
Toonche is the executive director. She has the title of project director, but she's the go-to girl for Linus Justice Impacted Women's Alliance, for those of you asking on TikTok. And she was the start her little heart. That's where Linus started.
Yeah.
Her cold little heart.
My cold little heart. It's like the Grinch's heart. It began to beat with the more I found all the women that I was incarcerated with out here, and the more they found others that they were incarcerated, my little heart began to beat and open. It did.
I love that John Lamberton is watching from Facebook, and he had said some things. I see your other comments too about definitely some things that happened negatively in the medical field. But then also, on a positive note, there were staff on the Polunsky unit that would go out of their way to help many of the men in need. Some even list their jobs for doing it. And so we certainly appreciate anybody that works in that environment, in that harsh environment, that holds on to, and it's not easy, I don't think, because I didn't hold on to my moral ground while I was in that environment. I didn't hold on to what I knew was about myself. I changed to adapt to that environment. So I'm not judging. Like that happens. It's very real. But for those of you that aren't doing that, that's amazing. My friend Debbie Tober, I did time with her on Lane Murray. She mentioned one of the staff members, one of the nurses, because I think that you can get in that environment and you're dealing with not only a vulnerable population, a population that the majority are experiencing very heavy mental health issues, a population that we didn't have anything else, like we don't have any responsibilities as far as jobs, or we had jobs, but you know what I mean, bills and that kind of thing. And so our mentality, it's almost like when you take a group of grown women and then you're treating them like children, we revert back to that a little bit. So we understand medical staff is having to deal with all of these barriers, including what we gave them. And it wasn't easy. So we definitely appreciated that. And Desiree's watching from Facebook, talking about the medical staff on the Mountain View unit treated us like human beings. And wasn't that something when you went into a place that you were nervous to get there, that sometimes you had a pod boss in the dorm that was aggressively acting like you weren't going to get out for your medical pass? I mean, it's a challenge to get to medical, y'all. It's not like, hey, I don't feel good, I need to go to medical. That's not how it works. Like, you drop a pass and then you wait and then you get a pass, and then maybe it's lockdown, maybe it's second count, maybe it's shift change. All of these things can prevent you from even getting there. And then sometimes people would come back from medical and be like, Miss Henderson's working medical. You do not want to go up there. She is writing everybody up. She's writing cases. And people would be like, I'm not going. I'm not going.
Desiree made a comment about, thank God for Debbie Jo and all the dorm mamas. I think that's what that says, mamas. And I want, that is so touching to me for Desiree, of all people, to remind us of this, because I hope she doesn't mind what I'm fixing to share. But when I lived at Riverside and I was younger, I was in, I was 19, 18, something like that. And I did a lot of time with Desiree. We remember, girl, we lived in the barn when we were on the yard, and then we lived in four dorm. And she was very much a mother figure to me. And she was also had some medical background. And so when I would get sick, I used to get terrible ear aches. Sometimes it would turn into strep throat. And I always knew there was a certain feel inside of my ear. And I went to medical with that same doctor that she just mentioned. I had to, Marci. I was sick. I had a fever. I waited all day on medical. I was the last one in there. I sat down. I remember looking at the second hand on the clock. It did not even get all the way around the clock. And he said, "Oh, you're here. You have an earache." I said, "Yeah, and it hurts here." Like I had pus pockets on my throat. I saw them. I could see them. My breath smelled like death. And so he grabs my ear and sticks the thing, and he says, "There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong." And I was stunned. So I just sat there because I was like, please no, like I am sick. I'm sweating with a fever. It showed a fever on the vitals. And he said, "Are you stupid? Did you not hear me?" I said, "Get out." So I go back to the door in tears. I'm sick. I'm hurting. And Desiree was always my personal medical care provider. And I remember that she was like, "Okay, let's look at some things that we can do to try to treat it." And I remember that she made up some warm water. Now, I don't know if this is medically sound or not, but it worked. Warm water with Colgate, the kind that has peroxide in it, because we used to get the big tubes of that. And so she mixed a little and made it warm. And she laid me down and poured it into my ear because it had peroxide in it. And you're not supposed to eat toothpaste, but cotton swabbed my throat. And she put a little piece of cotton in there. And she would come and check on me. I'm going to cry thinking about it, Desiree. And over about the span of a day or so, I got better and I felt a lot better. And I think about that sometimes when I get earaches. I have all this freedom to go to the doctor, and I do now. But I don't know what I would have done without her as a kid in the system. I had to have that dorm mom be able to care for me because they weren't going to at all. And then when the copay was $100, nobody went. For sure, nobody went. Which that was the whole reason, right? But thank you, Desiree. If I never got a chance to tell you that, it's been so many years ago, but thank you for making sure that I lived. That was not the only time she took care of me when I was sick either.
I think that every dorm had maternal figures, but also former medical staff. It seemed like there was always a nurse or two in the dorm. And that's where we sought help from first. Like that was the first move is to talk to them. And we had our own concoctions when we were sick with different ailments. And I never heard about the ear concoction, but I'm just thinking about our own hot toddies with, hot water and melt a mint and crush up some CTM pills and maybe a shot of hot sauce in there, and we would drink that down. And a lot of that, I think maybe for those kind of illnesses that worked for us because we believed it would work. And I think that sometimes you can heal yourself with those kind of symptoms I'm not saying don't go see a doctor, but what I'm saying is I know your brain controls your body, and I think that's a lot of that. But thank goodness, yes, thank goodness for our family in there to help us get through. Uh, what do you think? We have a lot of our family on here on the show on the Rec Yard with us that have incarcerated loved ones right now. The chat's full of my husband or this or my mom or this, and what do we recommend if you have a loved one inside that's telling you something's wrong and they're not getting medical care?
So I believe that the best advice always is to document everything, like on paper, right? Like, so your loved one is sending you whatever document they have. I don't care if it was an answered I-60, sick call, grievance, to make sure that you have that. And you have to be their advocate. So also, now, just because they're your spouse, your legal spouse, but certainly if you're just a friend, they need to get you on their medical release. Okay, that's a whole separate thing, that they're not going to release any information to you. They're not going to talk to you about their medical condition unless they have a signed release from the incarcerated person.
And in Texas now, that has to be renewed. It's not
Right.
never ending.
Right.
So it's like every 6 months, and that's something every incarcerated person needs to have that form filled out for their loved one, whoever you want in charge of that. That's important in your health, in your healthiest moment. You still need that.
You still need that. And they just drop a form to go to medical records, which is in the medical department, but it's separate. You got to drop a separate form for it. They fill it out. I would also, too, this is what I always did, and these are preventative things, maybe not in the emergency. Not only do you do that, anytime you see the doctor, I always did lab reports. I always went to medical records and looked at it myself. I would like to lab reports on July 1st from this visit with this provider. I want to look at it. They have to pull it up. Now, it's 10 cents or maybe 13 cents now, a copy, and the incarcerated person has to fill out a little form to take that money off their books. But I did it. I want copies of my blood work so I can look it up myself. I know I'm not a medical professional, but there were a lot of stuff that we did in that library, Marci, that I had my boss order plenty of medical books and a lot of lab report books so that we could look it up ourselves and ask the questions we needed to. So that I firmly believe in. But if there is an emergency or there's something going on now, you as the loved one, you got to call the unit. You got to call the unit. You got to call the warden. You got to call medical. You got to call Huntsville. You wear their motherfucking asses out. Now, that being said, pick and choose your battles. And what I mean is, when you have loved ones that call up there about everything, where's my husband's ID?
We didn't get a channel check.
We didn't get a channel check. He didn't get to go to rec tonight. When you do that, you're not effective.
They don't care about you calling.
They don't care about none of that shit. So then when you call, they're like, oh, Lord, here's so-and-so again. But if you don't call very often, you got to use your card, right? Like, you got to pull your card out at the right time. In something like this, you wear their asses out. And Lord help the poor souls in there that don't have outside support, because they are truly at the whim of whatever happens to them in that system.
And we get letters from, hey, my bunkie this. I did that while I was locked up. Hey, they're not doing anything for this girl, Mom. I need you to file an ombudsman complaint, and this is, what else can we do? We have to figure out how to support each other. But certainly if it's a medical emergency, and they're telling you they're in severe pain, something's wrong. We know our bodies. We know when something's not right. And if they're telling you that and they're not getting medical attention, you better be on that phone, and you better be relentless. And you better also know that oftentimes staff will just tell you whatever to shut you up and get you to stop calling. So you have to stay in contact with your loved one and keep calling until something has changed. And with that said, we are in the middle of the summer in Texas. And if your loved one is telling you that they are dehydrated, that they are experiencing any heat illness related symptom, if they have stopped sweating, you better blow their phones up. You call the unit, you get on the phone and start emailing the ombudsman, you start emailing go to the TDCJ website and email everybody that has an email address.
Right.
And you have to do it. We're
You
losing
call,
people.
that's right. You call and you email, you write a letter. You do whatever documentation and effort that is available to you, right? Because you're I hope to God you don't need it for some type of legal action later, right? But like you have got you have to. Like I remember, let me not say that. I better not keep that. Sorry. Sorry, you guys, we're under a lawsuit right now. So
Yes.
I'm trying to keep some things. But certainly, like Marci said, people that they are in some danger right now, some real high temperatures, and that is summer has just gotten started. And so you want to make sure that and if you don't have the phone hooked up for your loved one, and I know that it can be challenging figuring out that technology. It can be challenging, making sure there's money on the phone to hear from them. It is super important that they have a way to get a hold of you as soon as they can, especially during this heat.
Absolutely. I don't know what's going. I feel very invested to tonight's show. I'm reliving a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, we're already getting reports of women that have passed away, and last summer was brutal for that. And they're not talking about putting temporary air conditioning units in some of the prisons like they did last year. So it is tough and it is scary, and especially in this situation where the medical staff is understaffed and overworked, and dare I say underpaid. I don't know what they get paid, and products of their environment. So they're just not offering very good medical care in there. Some of those nurses, man, Toonche, they were vicious. They were vicious. I went in one time. There was a nurse, and that's what I was going to say. My friend Debbie in the chat earlier, she mentioned a nurse, and she said that was the worst one. And I remember going in first. I don't even remember what for at that time, and that nurse being so vicious with me that I left. I just left, and didn't ever like it's whatever. I come back. I continued to be sick. So days later, I'm back in medical, and I'm getting another nurse has me taking my vitals, and my blood pressure and my heart rate were through the roof. Mm-hmm. And it was that nurse. She was not talking to me, but she was talking to the person she was helping. And she was just being so vicious that it was physically affecting my body. And that nurse is like, I just don't understand what's going on with you. And finally I said, it's because of Nurse Fred over there. It's because last time I was in here, how she treated me. And now I hear her voice. This is what it does. Like, it's a physical reaction. And again, the nurse helping me, she was great. She said, just calm down, try to tune her out. And she was talking to me calmly. But this is the kind of thing, here in the free world, when we have a bad experience in a medical facility, we just go pick another one. If we don't like our doctor, we just go to another doctor.
I'm not going back there anymore.
Right? It doesn't happen. Yeah, it doesn't happen. Desiree's bringing up a good point, and I think that someone else talked about medical transport. Sometimes medical transport, getting to and from the hospital, makes you even sicker. Your hours without water, without food. I mean, I've never had a Johnny on a medical transport bus. I mean, yeah, you might not eat all day. You're right. You might arrive at the unit after their chow time.
And Marci, that we were so proud of our bill that we helped get passed. And we even got on here and talked about how excited we were to hear from the women that they were getting better care and better food when they were laid over at Plain State, which, wow, Plain State, well, good job, right? Like they're getting access to air and hot food. And then,
and I don't know, things like mattresses to sleep on while they're on their way to the hospital, to and from the hospital. They were housing them overnight just on the metal frame. People that just had surgery coming back from the hospital on their way back to the unit. And so, yeah, this legislation gets passed and we get letters of people saying, oh, thank you. We just went on. Everything was different. They treated us different. They fed us. Imagine being so excited that you got fed. That's what kind of situation we're in. And now, months later,
back in the saddle, back to the bullshit, back to the not eating, getting. And now the thing is not just a return of bad living conditions, but now what we're hearing is that these women are getting trapped, what we would say trapped at Plain State, lost in the system, classification. It's taking them forever to get back to their units. And that part at least wasn't like that. You went, you got your appointment, you went back, but they're just getting lost in classification. So remember, they don't have their property. They have very scarce property with them. And you can't go to the store.
You don't have you don't have your property. You don't have often your KOP medication. You don't have sometimes things like you might have shampoo, but you're not allowed to have conditioner. You're not allowed to have, you might have a comb, but you definitely don't have your hairbrush. I mean, just a very bare minimum. You don't have a book to read to keep your mind occupied while you're sitting in the cell, like with no TV or, this is it. Jennifer Mack, watching from Facebook, says, I think survivor's guilt is a real thing after experiencing TDCJ and the people we have lost. Make sure y'all are taking care of your mental health.
That's real. And you know what? I know we're getting close on our hour here. And I hope the advice for loved ones is a solution. It's the only solution we currently have as we, continue to work on policy and legislation and advocacy to change this stuff. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope people really heard us. And too, though, Jennifer, thank you for bringing that. It is a lot, and it is survivor's guilt. Like, I made it through, and all the people I left behind, all the people that have passed away, that didn't get the chance that I got. I got 2 chances for freedom. And let me tell you something, Marci, I feel incredibly guilty about it because I know women better than me who did less than I did, who are still there. And I carry a tremendous amount of guilt. But, the best thing I can do is just continue to be better each day and work with y'all to elevate these things. But also remember my own mental health, right? Like, this stuff is triggering as fuck. And we have to be able to process our feelings and talk about it in a way that feels, educating, putting it out there, taking the secrecy away from it, but also balancing, not just what in recovery spaces they're called war stories, like trauma dumping, right? Like, it's to share stories for a purpose. And that is for everyone on this podcast that you hear the stuff me and Marci talk about. You are called to action. You're not just a curious bypasser, right? Y'all come every week. You are called to action. You're a part of this community. And whether that's writing your legislators, whether that's calling TDCJ on their shit, right? Like, in offering solutions, I'm proud of what we built here because I do believe that our community here does take actions in the ways that they feel compelled to based on these sharing of story and personal experience. So
those actions include when you all share our lives, when you share the podcast, when you talk about things that you hear on the podcast. Change starts with conversations. And I think that a lot of the reasons that our prison system has gotten so or been allowed to live in this kind of culture of oppression with such little value of human life for incarcerated people is because what's done in the dark has been staying in the dark. Well, now it's our job to bring that to light so that things do change. And we love you all. So thank you for participating in the live. Thank you for commenting. We appreciate you. We see you on all the platforms where you're joining us from. We value you. Thank you for making comments and sharing. And if you're listening, wherever you hear your favorite podcast, leave us a review. Any final thoughts, Toonche?
Well, to keep it a little lighthearted so we can end on some lightheartedness, it's okay if those reviews are, Toonche's my fave.
Oh my gosh.
Toonche is
Why would they say that?
I like her swag. Didn't Diane tell us that somebody said, I like Toonche's swag? And you said, oh, God.
That doesn't sound like me.
Oh, wait. Well, I forgot the eye roll.
Because everything we post is like, Toonche, Toonche, Toonche. Bless your little heart. Listen, Pappy. Listen, you ain't got it like that, Gramps. Okay, folks, we will be back here next Wednesday night, same time, same place on the Recyard Women's Prison podcast. If you guys have ideas for shows or questions that you want answered on the show, please do leave that. Hey, are y'all following us on Facebook? If not, why not? And that's a great place to contact us. That's a great place to leave comments and questions for us to answer on the show. We love you all, and we will see you. I'm trying to get everybody's comments in. I see y'all. Thank you for commenting, telling us good night, and we will see you next week. Out with us on the Recyard Women's Prison